Okay, we are painting Corey Barksdale today in the Mimic the Masters Harlem Renaissance edition. And what you're seeing me do right now is tracing the image onto the canvas. Now, there's your tracing paper, which you have in your packet, and then there's also carbon paper. You want to put the shiny side down onto your canvas. So again, I'm going to say that shiny side down onto your canvas um, before you start doing anything, because otherwise you'll do all of this tracing and then the image won't transfer. So the best way to do this, you put the shiny side down, put the tracing paper on top of your canvas towards one edge or the other, and then start tracing using a ballpoint pen or a pencil, whatever you have handy with a medium pressure. So right now you're just seeing me take my time and tracing along the edges of the paper. Now, I can't remember if I already washed the canvas, meaning I used a mix of one color and diluted it with water. But for now, we're just tracing. And another thing I want to point out is the brushes over to the right. You have those brushes as well. One of them is a 14-inch flat brush. It has a straight edge. And then there's a 12-inch round brush that has a pointed edge. So just go ahead and trace that image to your canvas and take your time doing it so you have a good image. Now, one thing that you're going to find happens is that, as you can see on the left hand side of the paper, you can see the shiny side there. On the left hand side of the paper, there's some area where the carbon paper doesn't reach. So what we're going to do is we'll just lift up the edge and make sure that we've transferred the image on the right hand side of the canvas, and then we'll strategically keep our hand down on the canvas on top of the tracing paper, on top of the carbon paper, and then move the carbon paper underneath strategically to the left. So for now, we're just going to finish tracing that image on the canvas. And excuse the paint on my hands. I think I painted another class right before this. I didn't have a chance to wash my hands. So I decided this time that it would be a good idea to use a straight edge to make the straight lines for the guitar. So I'm doing that now. You can do that as well. It just gives you a nice starting point. So again, I'm picking up the edge of my canvas and just kind of making sure that the image is tracing. And see how I held one end of the tracing paper down while I move the canvas to the left so I can get those edges of the traceable that I was not able to get in the position that the carbon paper was sitting. So yeah, you just strategically hold your hand down while you move the tracing paper around the area of the canvas. Okay, so you should have something that looks kind of like this. And yeah, so while we're waiting for things to get straightened out here, I think what I'm doing is picking up the colors that we're going to use, and I think the primary color that we're going to use is yellow. So we're picking up some yellow using our palette knife. And then I'm mixing in a little white with that. Mine had a little green in there, but don't worry about that. What our goal is here is to create a kind of pastel-y color. and it's basically just a wash. We're going to add quite a bit of water to this using our number 14 flat brush. So you want your paint to be the consistency of a thin ink, because again, this is just a wash and we're laying down the foundational colors of this piece. And when we think about the artist Corey Barksdale, who originates from Atlanta, Georgia, and is actually not from the Harlem Renaissance period. The whole reason that I chose Corey Barksdale is because his work just reminded me of the Harlem Renaissance period and the advent of the jazz movement and the poets, and it just spoke to me. So I included his piece in the Harlem Renaissance series, and it turns out to have been very popular. So, again, what we're doing right now is we're creating a wash using what the number 14 is known to be, and that is a wash brush. And that is just laying a foundational color onto the canvas as a basis for us to build, which is the nature of acrylic paints, which is basically just layering color on top of color to achieve an artistic effect. And we can still see our image through the color wash of yellow, which is what we want. So yeah, Corey Barksdale grew up with parents who were also artists, and his art is influenced by African artists. You'll notice that the colors are really vibrant, and he attributes those choice colors to his African heritage, the bright primary colors, and then he blends them together in his own way. And this spoke to me because it was almost like you could hear the music in this painting. So yeah, if you're having any trouble with getting your color to lay down, just add a little more water to your mixture. Your paint should not be thick. It should not be like paste. It should be like an ink, a thin ink. So yeah, so Corey Barksdale is originally from the Nashville area of Tennessee, and he was exposed to art at a really young age by his grandmother, who was a quilt artist, and his mother, who was a gifted interior designer. I have not reached out to him yet. I want to let him know that we're honoring his art and his style through the the Masters series, the Harlem Renaissance period. Last month we did the Mimic the Masters series, but we did Georgia O'Keeffe and Salvador Dali and Rene Magritte. And I think he would be honored to know that we classified him as one of the Harlem Renaissance artists. So I'm going to be reaching out to him very soon. I just get a little ahead of myself, a little busy. I'm not able to do everything that I want to do. Making a connection with such an awesome artist is one of the things that's on my agenda. So yeah, he's a contemporary artist. You can find him on Instagram. Maybe you'd like to share your painting with him when you're done. From what I understand, he's newly engaged. He's embarking on a new journey in life. But if you look at some of his art, and I basically all you have to do is do CoreyBarksdale.com, and you'll see all of his art is very brightly colored and very African colored inspired. So right now what I'm doing is I'm picking up red. And whenever I use red, acrylic red, I always blend in a little orange or another primary color so that there's some opacity to it. It tends to be a little translucent, so orange gives it a little more tooth. So we're starting up in the upper right-hand corner of the painting. and we're trying to mimic his style. What was he trying to achieve? Whenever I'm doing a painting like this in the Mimic the Master series, I try to think about what the artist is attempting to accomplish. And it looks to me that he just wants to create a merge, kind of a merging of colors, um, and very closely mimicking the idea of the sounds that music make. I think about the reverberations that the sounds of our voices make and the sounds that musical instruments make when I look at the shapes and the colors that he creates while he's painting. So, just want to remind you again that the nature of acrylic paint is layering your work. You will see that when you're laying down color, that you're not going to get that immediate vibrancy that you might expect. It will take several layers to achieve the intensity of colors that you see in the Cory Barksdale piece. So what I tell my students is just to keep moving forward. Another thing that I tell students is to take a photograph of your work as you're doing it, to see how you're progressing and to see the progress that you're making. What I'm doing here is I think I've made a little boo-boo, so I go back with a wet paper towel, just using the tip. You can also correct the mistake by just dipping your paintbrush into water, cleaning your brush, wiping that brush off onto a paper towel or a cloth, and then using the slightly wet tip or edge of that brush and just wiping the mistake away. So here you see me trying to create the texture that, the lines that Cory has made. But what I'm feeling like is that you're probably going to need some blow dry action sometime pretty soon. Although I think for this particular painting we got through it without doing the blow drying. It just actually took several layers to accomplish that. So if you are now at the stage where you're filling in this orangey area, don't worry about that it doesn't look exactly like Cory's. Of course, the name of this program is Mimic the Masters. We're doing our best to mimic what they're doing because, of course, they are masters. So the next thing you'll see me doing is going into the other side of this area using the flat edge of the number 14 brush. The number 14 brush is really good for making straight edges. And our goal is just to blend. So the idea is to do wet on wet blending. You want to work within the same area so that you can do this blending of colors, and ideally you'll do that while the paint is wet. You'll find that you're not going to be successful unless, of course, you blend your paint together while it's wet. And so as you can see, I'm looking at myself after the fact, having done this painting, and I see my dyslexia kicked in a little bit, but actually there's a lot more yellow going on in that area than I've allowed for, which is fine. We can layer that. I'm taking some white and mixing it into my yellow so that I can go back into that area and layer some yellow on top of that orangey red mixture. And I'm using the number 14 brush because it allows me to create a straight line and kind of flick that yellowy white color into the orange area. And I can go a little further with that when I actually give this an opportunity to dry. I'll come back again and I'll add another layer of yellow, which you can do as well. So the objective for this painting is really just to concentrate on blending the colors together. And you'll have success with that if you do the wet on wet technique, which is just making sure that your brush color and the color that you're attempting to mix into are both wet. And as you can see, I'm flicking my brush up towards the color that is the orange color at top. Another trick to blending is rinsing your brush clear of color, completely clear of color, wiping it off, and then just taking the dry brush, slightly wet, slightly dry brush, and using that to blend the color, and then wiping off your brush between each blended attempt. So the next color we're going to address is a lighter form of that yellow. It's got a lot of white. It's got a lot of white in it. So we're attempting to create the light tip. And that, when I think of the musical translation of this color, I'm thinking that what we're painting right now is a high note. It's a very high note. I don't know practically anything about um, reading music, but I did take classical guitar for about a year. But that doesn't mean I remember anything, right? But I do know there's a treble clef hidden somewhere in here. And I don't know if it's accurate that this is a high note, but it kind of feels like that. So you can probably tell me if I'm right or wrong if you know anything about music. Um, so we're just going to put down the foundational color, and it looks like I'm going to pick up a little of the phthalo blue. I'll put down some phthalo blue, mix a little white into that so we can get that upper curve and blend that into the white. I'm sorry, the yellowish, the pale white. So in that sense, we're kind of attempting to duplicate what he did in terms of color, but our biggest um, our biggest objective is just to try to be good at blending, try to master his wet on wet technique. And from what I understand in researching this particular painting, he actually used oil colors. So we're working at a slight disadvantage in that we're using acrylic. Acrylic tends to dry faster, so don't beat yourself up if you find that you're not 100% successful in your first attempt. Again, acrylic paint is the nature of it is layering, and that's what we'll find ourselves doing. So, though we'll get through this painting in a little over 2 hours, uh, you can always go back to it. Artists always go back to their paintings and tweak them and add additional layers of color, take photographs of your art, and then find out where you can make improvements, and also give yourself a little motivation for continuing on by seeing how well you're doing when you take a photograph of your art. When you do take a photograph, it gives you a different perspective on your piece, because it's like a new set of eyes. It's a new vantage point for you to objectively and kindly view your painting. So now I'm attempting to go back again with another layer. And sometimes it's better to just go ahead and try to address that while you're at that point. Of course, it's up to you if you want to move on to another area. But try to follow along, because we're working from right to kind of left, and down the page and across the page. So it looks like we're mixing a little white in with the phthalo blue. And again, to get that really light phthalo blue, you're taking primarily white and you're adding just tiny, 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 tiny touch of phthalo blue. Okay, we never mix colors equally, like 50-50, except in some special circumstances for maybe purple or brown colors like that. So right now I'm just following up behind that high note that I envisioned with some white and some yellow, and it looks like a little touch of red, just to make like a pastel-y orangey color. And I think we're going to go around that little, and adding some more white. And we're just going around that area underneath that high note. And then outlining the area closest to the guitar. So if you find yourself getting or having problems getting into small spaces, I like to use the number 14 brush. And I guess here I'm seeing some blue over next to the guitar on the right. So I've taken some phthalo blue and just a touch of white, and I'm outlining that area. And again, I'm attempting to mimic his shapes. Um, and it's not the most 100% important thing. Again, we're just trying to mimic his work. We're not trying to copy it, right? Just mimic it. So I'm going in with a little blue, and you match this up in the best way you can, okay? Don't worry about duplicating the painting in an exact way. Paint what you feel. Push colors together that you feel belong together. And I think in this case, you want to continue using that number 14 brush because you're going against sharp areas where there's sharp edges required. For super small edges, we're going to soon pick up the number 12 brush because we can use the very tip of it to color in, for instance, the little dark circle you see under that high note. And also to fill in smaller areas as well. So I think now I'm going into this corner with red. And notice how my decisions about color do not match his 100%. And that's okay, because when you get done with this painting, you're going to have your own original musical piece of art, okay, with transitions and harmonies that you've created yourself. And now I've picked up a couple of different colors, I think. I did a little phthalo blue on just the tip of my brush with a little red as well, and I'm getting like a little purpley going on there. So I should actually be cleaning my brush, but I didn't. You clean your brush if you want to get that beautiful red or orangey color that he has going on there. And I think I actually like the idea that but there you see me cleaning off the brush. There's just a little bit too many colors going on there, so I'm cleaning that off. I'm wiping off my brush and drying it off a bit. And then I'm going to go back and pick up just some of that red and just go right next to those colors that I laid down previously. Because I'm not unhappy with them, but I just would like to see some more red. So that's what I'm doing. And I'm using that wet on wet technique to blend those two colors together. So now you really can't see where the other color stops and where my new color begins. They just have blended together rather nicely. And that's what you're trying to achieve. And yes, I'm using the straight flat edge of that number 14 brush, and I'm creating the curve. Looks like I picked up some orange. And again, as you can see, that's not an exact copy of the color combination that Corey used, but it is a harmonious blending of three colors there with the orange. So yeah, so now I'm going around that nice odd triangular-like shape to give it some definition. And then later on, we get to go back and do black to make all of these colors pop. So we'll outline that little shape with some black and make it pop like what you see in the image. And yeah, I actually discovered Corey Barksdale back in February when I initially moved into Studio 928. Our first live event was with LinkedIn, and we were celebrating African American History Month at that point. So, yeah, in February. So, I wanted to do something that was related to music and jazz and art for my studio. And so I was researching artists that had musical influences, and Corey was one of the first ones that I found back in February. And it just so happened that I thought, wow, his work really speaks to the whole Harlem Renaissance theme, the whole scene, the whole idea of art, jazz, poetry, movement, dance, writers and artists. And when I look at this work, it just brings back memories of Langston Hughes and oh, Dorothy. I can't remember her name right now. I want to say Lansbury, but that's not it. She wrote A Raisin in the Sun. Okay, so anyway, I can't remember her name. But just the exciting time, the tumultuous times they lived in, and it's expressed through their poetry and their music and their art and their dance and everything. So, at any rate, I invite you to go to his website. He's got paintings for sale there, and it's just there's a lot of his pieces that represent music and jazz. There's one called the Jazz Crusader that's really, really very cool. He does a lot of murals in the Atlanta area. And when I say that his art just practically jumps off the page, off the wall in this case, it's totally true. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Corey Barksdale's works are going to be works that are totally collectible. So if you're looking for some art to buy as an investment, I would say that he's one of those people. Also, I've been looking into Joseph Holston, who is another artist in the series of the Harlem Renaissance artists. And he's very similar to Jacob Lawrence, who we did for our first painting in the Mimic the Masters Harlem Renaissance series. So I invite you to take a look at those artists, Jacob Lawrence and Joseph Holston. They both, I think, were influenced by the Cubism movement of Picasso and Um, oh gosh, now I lost my other cubism person that I have in my memory banks, but then, I can't remember everything, right? Just going around and kind of seeing, what kind of colors are going on. And here we've picked up some orange. So I recommend that when you're using orange, just like when you're using red, just add just a tiny, 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 tiny touch of red. And that's the secret to mixing colors. When you have a color like red that can sometimes be translucent despite the intensity of the color, it takes something like orange, adding a little orange to it to give it that opacity that you need to lay down a foundational color. Same thing with orange. With orange, you could put it down, you're going to see right through it. So to help yourself to skip maybe one layer of layering the color, you can add just like to a half a teaspoon of orange, you would add like a 16th of a teaspoon of uh, red to give that color more opacity so that's not so translucent. Okay, but again, the nature of acrylic paint is going to be layering to achieve color intensity. So right now we want to get that curve laid down, mainly because contrast, I like the idea of contrast. You're probably wondering why I skipped that whole right side of the guitar. I don't know. That's how my brain works. I can't answer that question. You're, of course, welcome to do a systematic approach where you move from the right side of the canvas to the left. Um, but yeah, I chose to skip over to the other side, and that's just how my brain works. So I'm taking right now a mixture of a little phthalo blue on the end of my brush and then a little phthalo green mixed together. And that's how we're getting that blended combination of colors. And it works really well because those two colors are so closely related, phthalo blue and phthalo green. And now I'm adding a little yellow to that phthalo green to give this highlighted color on the opposite end of that blue-green color spectrum. And I'm using that straight edge of the number 14 brush to help with that straight edge. Look at how pretty that is. And then how I've chosen to complete the treble cleft may be totally different than what you decide to do. And that's perfectly okay because guess what? No matter what you do with this painting, it's going to be beautiful. You can't really go wrong. Just remember the idea of wet on wet blending. Try not to have too much paint on the end of your brush. If you find you do, then just take the end of your tray, your paint palette, and just dab it off the edge of your brush. Okay, so see how willy-nilly I am? Oh, I know why. Because I had the blue, the phthalo blue on the end of my brush, and the green I decided to go ahead and use that color while it was already on my brush. That's why I moved around. So I'm using the straight edge of my brush and I'm just going in a circle around that edge. And I'm just continuing that around the fret, the lower fret bar. And I'm going to try to bring those two colors together. We'll see. See how I remember this. So yeah, just take your time, enjoy laying down the colors. And now I'm seeing some lighter green, so I'm mixing some yellow in with that phthalo green and bringing that color into proximity of the red. And I'm attempting to blend those two colors together, wet on wet. So at this point, I'm using the flat end of my brush, and now I'm about to go back to using the straight edge to come in with some darker blue. And yeah, try to use your brush to kind of twist and turn your wrist so that you follow the flow of the guitar, its shape. And I think I'm picking up some more phthalo blue here. And I actually mixed it with a little white to create that highlighted area. But again, I'm going to come back later and layer over that. And again, I'm doing my best to mimic this master of color blending. We're copying his style. We're trying to copy his style. Getting into his headspace. What was he thinking when he was blending these colors together? And yes, we want to remember that contrast is really important. So what I'm seeing happening here from a perspective of, oh, I've already painted this, is that I want to see some red coming in here pretty soon, Cheryl, because we need to contrast these colors. And that's exactly what he's done. So I should be stopping right about now and cleaning off my brush and picking up some red. I may have even brought out the hairdryer, I'm not sure. But it's a good idea so that you can, when you paint the red, see me picking up red now, when you pick up that red, it doesn't blend together. But it looks like I didn't use the blow dryer, so I just started higher. And I put some blue on the tip of my brush so that the blue would contrast against the red background that we painted the very first thing. So yeah, just have some fun. Just think about combining colors. As long as you use that wet on wet technique, you should be just fine. Right about now, maybe you want to take a photograph of your work to see how you're doing. You guys can always stop this video and take a moment. It looks like we've been going for about 40 minutes. So if you wanted to stop the recording and get something to drink, I won't mind. So now I'm picking up some orange because now I want to hit that area right next to the strings with a brighter color. And it's wet on wet again, so I shouldn't have any problem blending those together. I'm using the flat edge of my number 14 to create a straight line. So again, don't worry about that the colors are not as intensive as you would expect them to be based on the original, because we actually have to go back and do another layer. It's going to take more than one layer. I'm guessing that Corey did not paint this in 2 hours. Probably took him a couple days, you know. Sometimes us artists get in the zone. We get in the zone, and then we're painting, we're having a great time. Then it's, our loved ones are like, it's time for dinner, you gotta eat, or we realize we've been sitting in the same place for 6 hours. It's time to get up. You gotta get up, gotta walk away. So then you come back and you go, your brain has had a chance to assimilate to different things around you and different perspectives, different colors, different lines, and you come back and you look at your painting and you go, oh my God, I missed that. I can add this, or I can add that, or this needs some more color, or this needs more contrast. So art is always a work in progress. And yeah, so as you can see, I picked up some black and we're going in. The best thing about doing these combinations of colors is the idea of adding black to these really already vibrant colors. So when you add the black in, it just makes everything pop. So everywhere that we've already laid down color, around the edge of the guitar, towards the base of the guitar, towards the upper left-hand corner of the guitar, they're all going to pop more when we use, in this case, I'm using the number 12 brush to kind of dot in the color. If you've never painted before now, you probably don't want to try to put the entire brush into that little circle. You're trying to use just the very tip of that brush with very light pressure to dot in the color into that small space. So you're just kind of dabbing in that color. And I can't tell, am I using the number 12? Oh, I am. I'm using the number 12. And yeah, dab, dab, dab to get into that small space. And so now, since I have black on my brush, I'm going to go over to the other side and go ahead and put that in, that contrast. And I'll probably hit the canvas in some other places where black is evident in the piece. So, is this? So yeah, I'm going along the base of the guitar and I'm adding in some black. This is also helping me realize where I'm at in the painting. I am a very dyslexic person. So I think adding the black in helps me keep my place and determine where I'm at. I'm that person who can look at a phone number or a series of numbers and totally uh, translating them, reverse them. So you can imagine in algebra class in college, I was in the learning center quite a bit, getting help and checking and double checking my work, because as accurate as you think you're being, your brain plays a trick on you and it just kind of reverses everything that you think is accurate. So now I'm going down the other side and I've picked up some red onto my brush and I'm blending that in. And I think I am totally focusing right now on the treble cleft. So we're going to come down the other side with red. And actually, that's not the other side, that's actually um, in the center of the treble cleft. But I just love the treble cleft. It is such a beautiful symbol. Its grace and elegance and the flow of it. It's kind of like the ampersand. Some ampersands are really pretty, but the treble cleft is just my favorite symbol. Seems to me if Prince was going to change his name to a symbol, he would have chosen the treble cleft, huh? So now I'm coming up. I picked up some green and I'm going to the other side of the treble cleft. And the idea here is just to make sure that you have contrast between the color you're painting next to and the color you're laying down. Okay? Again, you don't have to follow his color palette exactly, or I shouldn't say color palette, but his color choices exactly. You just have to make sure that they contrast. The color that you're laying down contrasts with the color you're painting next to. So it looks like I'm painting, and you can't see it. It's a little off screen, but that's okay. It's a little combination of phthalo blue and a little black. And we're painting that round circle on the bottom of the canvas. And when you see me reaching over the canvas, it's me dipping into the water to make sure that my paint has not elasticity, liquidity. It's the texture of an ink as opposed to a paste. We don't want big um, pasty ridges, although in some cases it's okay to do that. To have texture, you can build textures onto your canvas. Some of the my favorite works are of paintings that are done with a palette knife, where we're just taking that palette knife, dipping into our paint, and then just directly using that palette knife to lay the color down on the canvas, which gives us ridges of color. Of course, it takes a little longer to dry, but it also adds another element of interest. So if you'd like to do that, you're more than welcome to do that. I would suggest doing that towards the end of your painting when you're hitting maybe a second layer, because the foundation that you're laying down now serves as a foundation or a base for that thicker color that you want to lay on top. I think this is one of those paintings that would look really good with some texture. So, back to the idea of mimicking the masters, why not take it a step further and improve on what they've done or add a different personal twist to the excellent work they've already done? And now I'm going towards the bottom of the painting again, and I think I'm just adding some contrast and filling in that red area. So now I've got this red next to the blue, and that ensures that the shape of my guitar stays in place and that the treble clef is easily visible, even though there's a multitude of colors happening in that area. Don't be afraid to mix just a tiny, tiny bit of black into some of the color shapes that you're painting. And as you can see here, I'm coming in with some more red on the guitar's upper left corner. And I'm using the number 12 brush here. It's really nice for covering larger areas, but then it's also really nice for painting in smaller areas as well. So now we're going to go around the end of the treble clef. So I'm picking up some black and I'm turning my number 12 brush. Once you get the color into the brush, you want to twirl it on the canvas so you get a nice point. As you can see, trying to show that to you. And now I've picked up a little red because I'm combining a little red with the black just so I have contrast. See how that makes it stand out more? When you're trying to create the wine color, you start with a red base. Then you add just a tiny, 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 tiny dot of black. And that's going to take your red from red to wine. Just a little bit at a time until you achieve the color you want. Now I'm going up the stem of the treble clef, using that number 12 brush with light pressure, just kind of filling in that tight area. Moving really slowly, laying my head firmly on the surface of my work surface or the canvas itself. And I'm just dragging that color into a straight line. Very nice and slow. And now it looks like I'm adding some more water or rinsing. Let's see which one. Yeah, just rinsing a little bit because I think now I'm going to go in and paint the bottom half. I'm taking a little red and a little black. A little more black than red. And I think, let's see where we're going now. Oh, okay, right there. And just using the very tip of that brush with very light pressure. The more pressure you put on the brush, especially the number 12, the thicker your line will be. So in this case, we want to put the lightest pressure that we can so that our brush stays contained within that narrow space. And yeah, I'm just dabbing with the very tip of my brush. You don't have to press hard enough for your whole brush to fill into that space. You're just using the very last two hairs on the tip of that brush to fill in those small spaces. Now it looks like I am coming in with a secondary color. It almost looks like a chessboard or something underneath the way he's laid these colors down. And if I were me and I'm watching this, I would be putting black in this area. So you're free to do that. Hindsight is 2020. And we're totally safe in doing that because once we get done with the first round and laying down this initial color, we can layer on top of that with contrasting colors as well. So it looks like I'm painting a little willy-nilly here. That's one of my favorite words. Sometimes my brain just skips off into la la land. So it looks like I went a little willy-nilly with my painting technique here. And again, I'm going to have to probably go back in again and layer on top of this color that I've created, which is kind of the wine color that I talked about, which is just adding a little bit of black to your red color is where this color comes from. It's going to be a combination of that wine color and more black very soon. And as you can see, yep, very predictable, Cheryl. I went in and added some more black to that area, and looks like I'm cleaning off that number 12 brush, and I'm going back in for some more of the wine color with a little red now, with a little more black, so that we're doing this wet on wet blending. Try to maintain the curve that's going on here. And just be very conscious of blending the two colors together. And next I'm going in for, it looks like some orange. Oop. Sorry about that. That looks like blue. So some phthalo blue. And I think we're going to follow that up, mix in some white with that to pick up that lighter blue color we have going on the edge of the canvas. I just love this painting. All of the colors. Ooh. So yeah, I'm just going around and kind of defining that line, that curved line going around the edge of the painting. And however you achieve your left side of the painting is 100% up to you, as is the whole painting. Remember, the objective is just to blend colors together, create contrast as you paint. Make sure that you don't put two colors that are very similar close together because you'll lose the definition of the shapes, and we don't want to do that. So here I've picked up a little orange and white and red. I've blended those together, and now I'm attempting to merge those colors with the darker bluish green that is already laying down. Now it looks like I've picked up some white. So yeah, this is like trying to continue that wet on wet process. Just layering those colors together so that they blend. And at this point, Cheryl, I would suggest that you clean off your brush and do some just uh, colorless brushing to blend those colors over on the left-hand side of the canvas. But no, she doesn't do that. She goes back in with some black. Oh, because she thinks that we need some more contrast between that blue and that red to make the blue pop a little bit more. So that's what's going on here. We're trying to create some contrast. We're going in against the shape of the guitar. And we're attempting to blend those colors together, the red and the black, the burgundy that we created by adding some black to the red. And now look at that guitar just pop off the page now that we've laid that black down next to it. Just pops right off the page. And now I think we're rinsing. Are we rinsing again some phthalo blue? What are we doing here, Cheryl? Let's see, what did she do? Yeah, she came in with the phthalo blue because we want to blend all that together while it's wet. Yes, 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 yes. Just the idea of blending those colors together while they're wet. Using that straight edge of that number 14 brush and kind of using it to flick those colors together. Using that wrist action, curving that brush. Ooh, and then inserting some red in there. Tricky. All right. Should be cleaning off your brush there. But she didn't. What's she doing now? I'm cracking myself up. Yeah, rinsing. Good girl. Rinse your brush, wipe it off. Now she's going in and picking up some of that white pastel-y yellow. Yeah, right next to that. Going around that black circle. Laying down that color. Bam. Yeah. Creating your own little shape right there in the corner. Creating your own little element of interest there. Okay, don't overdo it. That's enough. Okay, good. Okay, are we rinsing? Oh, we didn't rinse. We took the red and I just picked up some orange, add a little red to that. And where's she going now? Where's she going? She's going back to that musical note with just orange. Ooh, that pops out really nice. And she's flicking that brush, and she's going to merge those colors up with a flick of the brush. Yeah. Just flick that brush up and blend those colors. And now clean that brush off, get the excess paint out of it, and just twirl that brush and blend those colors together. Now she's going back in with some black. Uh-oh, I'm speaking of myself in the second person or the third person here. It's kind of fun, actually. And we're lining up that color, putting that intense black. And if I remember correctly, we come back and layer some red on top of this. But now we've got this black laying next to the guitar, so the colors are popping off the page. And at this point, we should be taking this color up to the top, but I could be wrong. What's she gonna do next? It's so unpredictable. Okay, looks like we're going back to the top with some black. Yes? Is that black? Yeah, it looks like it went to the black. I just love this painting so much. I'd like to do something similar to honor him. Something big, like 4 feet by 3 feet or something like that. Kind of a sofa painting, I guess, is what you would call it. Sofa size painting. So we call this a study, something small to kind of get an idea of what it would look like when it's really big before wasting money on a bigger canvas. So yeah, just remember that when you're using your paints, to not let them sit in water too long. Better to tap off the excess paint. Make sure your brush is clean, and then lay it down flat on your work surface as opposed to letting it sit. Because these are really nice art student quality paintbrushes. So they will last you for several months, up to a year. Um, I've been using my current set for about 6 months, and I'm changed right after I did this painting, not because they weren't good anymore, just because I wanted some new brushes. I wanted to use new brushes. So, but these will last you a long time. Just make sure you don't let them sit in water, because if you do, then they start to crack, and a little metal ferrite thing that holds your bristles in, it'll expand, and then you'll start losing hairs or getting hairs on your painting. You'll find that when you're painting with these brushes, you will not have any hair coming out of your brush onto your painting, which can be very frustrating and annoying. So right now I'm taking my straight edge of my number 14 brush, and I'm kind of dabbing some straight line in right now, because I didn't trust myself to pull a straight line. Now, of course, I could take my ruler again and try to accomplish the same thing, but I decided that I was just going to sharpen the end of my number 14 and just kind of follow along the edge of the painting. So as you can see, as I mentioned before, I can be a little willy-nilly in my approach, but it gets us the same result, which is that's what's important, right? So now it looks like I'm coming back again with finishing off that treble clef, and I'm thinking that's phthalo blue, but before we do the phthalo blue, I think we're doing black here. I'm just gonna fill in that area next to, oh, I see. We're painting the bottom corner of the guitar first. And that can be phthalo blue, or it can be pitch black if you like. And now I'm going around and finishing off that treble clef. And that's a combination of a little phthalo blue and a little phthalo green to finish off the treble clef. Okay, so now we're putting that contrast in. The very end of the treble clef, looks like we got some green going on, merging into that red. And yeah, so since the paint is wet, it's doing a nice blending, and that's what we want, right? So yeah, we're mixing some orange and it looks like some yellow together. And we're going for that area right at the very bottom of the canvas. There we have it. And then it looks to me, if I'm guessing what Cheryl's doing correctly, that the next step will be maybe some red on the other side. So we're rinsing off that brush, wiping it off, getting it nice and clean. And we're still using that flat brush, getting a nice sharp edge. And now we're going in with the black right next to that. Now we're gonna have to do something to make sure that that black doesn't merge in with the stem of the treble clef, although maybe, yeah, it's supposed to be solid, so that's fine. Yeah, there, that looks good. Just love the swirly lines on this painting. Excellent. So now we're getting that sharp edge again, and now we're going back over that area on the guitar with some black. It's going to make that yellow pop out. So we're outlining that area with the edge of this 14 brush. And yeah, we're going to go in and take that 14 brush and I think create some lineage here and there. Yeah, right there underneath the base of that guitar. That's where we get that contrast and that to make those colors pop. And yeah, just using that green or that black right next to that green and blue. Now you can also take the number 12 brush, which I think that's what I'm doing here, and just twirl that into that black color so you can get the really tight areas that form a circle around the hole in the guitar. I don't know what that's called. There we go. Nice. And yeah, if you find you're losing the edge or if you're losing the point on the brush, ooh, and now I'm going around and outlining the edge of that treble clef so it pops out a little bit more. If you find that the edge of your paintbrush is getting a little frayed, just dip it in a little water, dip it in your black paint, and then twirl it. Twirl your brush on the surface of the palette so that it comes to a nice point. And when you find that the paint is not moving along the canvas in the right way, it just means you need to add a little more water so that you have a nice inky consistency. And yeah, we're going along that blue and green and outlining that in black to make it pop even more. And I think we're going to outline that shape a little bit. And look at that. Take a picture. You'll be pleased. And yeah, just I'm going ahead and adding some more contrast near that treble clef so you can see that shape a little better. And then we're doing our outlining that area on the right hand side of the guitar, kind of trying to mimic that shape that Corey set up. But whatever shape you come up with is okay as well. And yeah, we're just going back in and trying to create some definition, some depth in that area because it almost looks like the guitar has some depth there. Like it's not just a flat instrument, it's an instrument with a resounding sound that he's created or he's depicted by showing the darkness of the blues and creating that additional sense of depth on this side. So, of course, what I've created here is not exactly what he did, but I'm trying to mimic that expression of color that he's set up there. So now the next part we're going to do is the outer area of the guitar, which on one side is a light blue and the other side is like an orangey color. So the blue, of course, will go on the side where the red is, and the red will go on the side where the blue is. But first, it looks like we're painting the base with some yellow, and then we're going to add some orange to that. And it looks like a little bit of white. And I don't typically dip into these little pots with my paintbrush. Typically I use a palette knife just to keep the colors pure because you can always reuse the colors that are in your kit. So I'm mixing those two colors together because yellow by itself, of course, is not going to do very much in terms of an opacity, laying down a foundational color. So adding a little white to that helps And then we're going to follow that up, I'm sure, this time with some orange. And yeah, we're going right on top of that black and some nice fat lines. Nice and slow, nice and straight. And we are using our number 12 to do that. So just take it nice and slow. And now I've decided I think that I'm going back to red. And we're mixing that with a little orange. And we're trying to mimic some of the color mixing that he did on this portion of the piece. I'm just kind of lining up the paintbrush. Sometimes I find I have to turn the canvas upside down or to the left or to the right so that I can make straight lines. And just so you know, I rarely ever paint on an easel unless it's a very, very, very big painting. I find that the best way for me to paint a smaller canvas like this is just kind of flat on a table surface. So it's also easier to create straight lines. And even if you are painting on a using an easel, did I say canvas? Even if you are painting on an easel, I'm adding some green here. And again, this goes back to just following, trying to mimic the colors he's laid down, but also kind of doing your own thing. So I'm laying down this green, look nice and slow. But what I was saying about the easel is that sometimes you limit yourself to what you can do in terms of leverage because you're painting straight on. Sometimes you may just want to turn your canvas to the side while it sits on the easel, or turn it upside down so you get a better angle, or hold it in the cradle of your arm so that you can get a better angle. Okay, so just because it seems that the canvas, or I'm sorry, that the easel is the tool that artists use to paint, doesn't mean you're, married to it. You're tied into it. So right now, I think we're going with looks like some red along the edge. And we're just blending those colors together because we can, because they're still wet. So there's like this symphony of green and yellow and red going up and down the frets of the guitar. And again, they don't have to be precisely like his are, just your interpretation of what that would look like. So I think at this point, pretty sure we have to get the hairdryer, huh? Let's see what she does. So it looks like we picked up some phthalo blue and some white. Oh, we're painting the sides of the circle on the guitar to get that light blue. See that light blue? And we're using the number 12 brush. So see how I'm laying that down, not letting it sit in the water. And I'm using just the very tip of the brush to pick up some color. And laying that down real nice and easy. I'm doing super light pressure here. It looks like I may be pressing down hard, but I'm not. If I did press down too hard, then the brush would overlap the edges of that circle. So we just want to use the very tip of the brush. It's all those colors playing together to create this harmonious piece of work. Ooh, and now we get to color that little circle, and I'm just dabbing in just with the very tip of the brush so I don't go too far outside the lines. How about that? As a contrast color, that blue. Who would have, I would never have thought of that blue. It's a very, very nice contrast. And now we're turning that painting right side up again. I guess it's up to you whether you think that turning it that way is right side up or leaving it on its side is the right way. Whatever, however you want to interpret it is up to you. Pretty sure I'm getting the blow dryer. Getting the blow dryer now because we need to dry that whole area so that we can make these straight lines up and down the frets for the strings. But first, oh, and I did it. See, I'm dyslexic. I did it totally the opposite way. It should have been opposite. The, the blue should have went on this side. I'm painting red right now, which means that I'm going to have to outline that circle on the outer rim so that we get that contrast of the circle being there. Yeah, I should totally have made that color be on the other side. So now since I already have orange on my brush, I'm just using that orange to paint that kind of contrasty color that's merging into the yellow. So we're picking up a little white and yellow to kind of overlap that, blend it together so that it works together. And I'm liking how that looks. I'm pretty sure now we should be going for the blow dryer because we're going to need to use I think I'm pretty sure I used the ruler to create the lines. And the trick to doing this when you use the ruler is you're going to take that number 14 brush and create a flat edge by dipping it into your black paint. Your paint has to be the consistency of ink. Okay, it has to be the consistency of ink. So yeah, we want to make sure. I think at one point I tried using the marker. That did not work. Because then we would have a mixed media painting. It would be a combination of acrylic paint and marker. So that didn't work. And I didn't dry the canvas. So that's interesting. Probably that's why it didn't work because the canvas wasn't dry. So what we want to do is just make sure that that number 14 brush, and also you want to lift that ruler up off the canvas, up. Don't drag it down or to the left or to the right. Pick it up directly into the air so that you don't get a streak of color from the paint that may still be sitting on the end of your ruler, okay? So make that black color the consistency of ink. Take your number 14 brush and dab it into the color, making sure the end of the brush is nice and straight and flat. So as you can see, I'm showing you here that your brush needs to be nice and flat. And why am I picking up the number 14 brush? Let's see. What is she up to now? What is she up to now? Oh, she's giving another coat of that blue because, you know, she's dyslexic. So, oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, so she wanted to put that blue color down the side. Oh, okay, I see. Okay. So we're just taking some of that lighter blue, that phthalo blue combination, and taking up the fret of the guitar. And even some green. I guess there's some green going on there too. So we're doing our best to just make a nice straight line. Notice how I'm holding my hand in one position and letting the paintbrush move. I'm not moving my arm, just laying my brush or laying my hand down on the surface and just using my wrist to move into a straight line. And there we have something that looks kind of similar to what he's done. So we're going up the other side with some contrasting red right next to that green. And now we're using the number 14 brush again. I'm getting paint on both sides of that brush for a nice straight edge. I'm using the edge of that palette to create a nice crisp edge so that it's a nice straight line that I get when I try to make this line. So yeah, I'm testing it on the paper right next. Light pressure. You don't want to push down hard on this. You want very light pressure. If you push down hard, you're going to get a super fat line. So you want to barely touch the canvas. And it looks like I didn't use a blow dryer. Huh, how did I pull that off? Well, partly because acrylic paint dries really fast. So that's probably why. Looking at this in hindsight, I would think that, yeah, you would blow dry that area. But I'm guessing like the top of the canvas is going to be pretty much dry. The only wet part we're going to encounter is lower down where we just painted. So I'm lifting see how I lift it up and not across. And then right next to that, I'm going to go and pick up some more inky consistency black paint. Make sure I don't have too much paint on the end of my brush. And then I'm just tapping the very edge of the brush. Very light pressure. Not pushing down at all, because if it doesn't make a line, that's better than a fat line, right? So we can go back and make another line on top of that, right? But not if you make a big fat line. When you make a big fat line, there's not much you can do to correct that unless you wait till the next day or blow dry it and then correct the line that way. So there we're making a third line, pushing the brush against the ruler so that we get, that straight line. And now I'm going to the next line, dabbing into some water and making sure I have enough inky consistency on the end of that brush, and dabbing it against the palette edge makes a nice crisp straight line for the end of my brush. And then I'm going to the opposite edge and making my final line. And then I'll probably go back and do some more contrast. So yeah, this would be another good time to go in. Oh, I'm putting another contrast line on the opposite side of the guitar. Make that pop out a little bit. This would be a good time to take a picture. You're going to be so pleased with what you've accomplished. Yes. What a difference a little black line makes. And making those colors on the right hand side of the canvas pop even more. So at this point, you can decide where you'd like to sign your painting. Maybe up on the upper right hand side of your painting, or maybe along the top right of the guitar, or maybe along the neck of the guitar. Be a nice area. So now I'm using, that black inky consistency um, paint to go along the edge of some of the areas, and wow, it just looks so cool when you have that contrast of black highlighting the brilliant colors that you've already laid down. And that's kind of what's going on here. And we're accentuating that treble clef a little more. You can clean up your edges. You can add some additional layers all around the painting. And that just makes such a difference. It's even correcting some mistakes that I've made. It looks more intentional, like I really intended for these things to happen now. And again, I'm achieving these straight lines by just doing the lightest pressure I can to get the minimal amount of a line, because as I said before, it's always easier to go back and add to that line than it is to try to fix a line that's laid down too heavily with pressure from your brush. So I'm outlining that nice blue circle going on at the bottom of the painting. So how much detail you decide to add to your painting is totally up to you. And knowing when to stop is an art. Apparently, oh, I see what I did here. I did some blending of, okay, all right. Because I was going to say, Cheryl, you're supposed to know when to stop. So yeah, we're adding some more dark color at the top for contrast, making sure our lines are nice and curvy and expressive the way Corey's are. And yeah, now I'm seeing that contrast really intensely on the left-hand side of the guitar. And go back in again and add another layer of black. And so at this point, we're just adding additional layers. And you can continue to add additional layers all the way around, intensifying your colors until you're 100% happy with your painting. And so, yeah, now I'm just going to keep fiddling around with this a little bit, and you can continue to fiddle around with your painting. And then, like I said before, don't forget to take a photograph of what you've done. Please make sure that you share your painting with us on the Studio 928 Facebook page. You just need to search for Studio 928 Oak Park, And then, yeah, just feel free to post your painting there. We also have a Facebook group that if you're into painting and you want to do more, I'm happy to share that link with your host. In fact, I will do that um, so that you can join the group. And then, yeah, aside from that, we're pretty much all done here. So I hope you enjoyed your time painting with me, and I hope that you'll paint with me again. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. So you take care now, and thanks for painting with me.